Hello, and welcome back to the Law of Attraction Tribe podcast. Okay, so today I want to share some really exciting news that I already shared on Instagram if you follow me at Law of Attraction Tribe, which is that I have now joined Cloud 10 Podcast Network. This is so exciting, and I want to dive into it today because I completely manifested this, and I want to talk about how that came about and what we're kind of missing with manifestation lately. Now that it's mainstream, some of the things that are just sort of overlooked that I feel like we lose sight of, and myself included. So, to start out with, if you have listened to the podcast for a while, you know that at the beginning of this year, like end of last year, beginning of this year, I was creating my goals for my life, my business, everything else. And there were some big sort of like changes that I was testing out this year. And one of those things was that I asked myself, what do I enjoy doing more than anything else in my business? Like, if I could just pick one thing and that's all I had to do, what would it be? And the answer was podcasting. I love it. I could do it every single day for the rest of my life. And I don't think I would ever get sick of it or dislike it. I just love it. It's kind of what started out the business. And it's just what I enjoy doing the most. And so I thought, okay, how can I lean more into that? And then what do I not love? Like, what is draining me right now? What do I feel like sort of depletes my energy? And that was social media, and Instagram, it's so different from when I first started. And even TikTok has changed a lot to where it just feels so, I don't know, like spammy, I guess. Like it's just, I feel like I don't know, like it's just not lighting me up anymore. I feel like, first of all, not everyone is even seeing, what I'm posting. And every time I'm on there, it's just so many messages that are nothing but spam. And it's just been driving me crazy. And when you look down into it, it's like it really does nothing for my business. When I ask people that sign up for courses and things like that, they usually find me through the podcast. It's never like, oh, I found you on social media. It's always, I found you on the podcast or I read your book, something like that. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to really try to shift that focus. So instead of being so concerned about posting every day on social media, maybe I can shift that energy and that time and pour it into the podcast. And so I just decided, like, I'm going to go all in. I'm going to really make the podcast my primary focus. And then the other big thing is that I said I'm not going to do live calls. So no one-on-one coaching, no group coaching, masterminds, nothing. No live calls for a whole year. And this was basically a long time coming because I have been really going all in and working really hard on this business since like 2020. And I think I just reached a point of like burnout where I was feeling like just overwhelmed and energetically just depleted. And like something had to give, right? And I had this mentality that in order to be successful and have this kind of business, I have to do live calls. I have to do, this, that, or the other. And so I just sort of dispelled that myth and I really stuck to it. No live calls. And it's been hard. It has been really hard because I've had a lot of people reaching out wanting coaching, asking when I'm doing another mastermind. And I've just told people like, just hold off. Like I'm not doing that this year. And I really sort of was able to just dive into like the things that light me up. So podcast, being a mom, um, and just kind of like diving in at a extremely deep level on manifestation, um, sort of like the science behind it, the quantum physics behind it, and all that kind of stuff. And it's been really cool. It's been a long learning journey, and I've loved it. So Anyhow, you fast forward through to like the summer. And here's where I want to talk about the podcast deal and manifesting and the things that come up, okay? Because around the summer is always a slow time in my business. It just is. It's like people are busy, kids are home from summer break, people aren't thinking as much about manifestation and goals and personal development as they are at the beginning of the year or the end of the year. So it's just kind of a slow time. And I know that, but it still always messes with my head. And then you start questioning everything. And I was questioning, like, should I be doing live calls? Should I be doing masterminds? Should I be putting more focus on social media and just questioning everything? And I really had to just like say out loud, you know what? Like, I'm just going to trust you, like to the universe. I'm going to trust the process. And this is what I want to do. Like, I want to be a podcaster. I want that to be my main focus. And like, send me a sign that everything's going to work out, everything's going to be good, everything's going to be okay. And that I don't, I shouldn't be switching gears and doing live calls or something like that. And so around this time, my friend Megan, who's been on the podcast multiple times, you guys have heard from her, she was connecting with me and she had gone to a podcast event and was talking about, possibly doing one. And she just kind of mentioned in passing, like becoming visible to podcast networks because that's the end goal, right? And I was like, huh. I mean, I guess, but I've never really thought about it. And that might sound crazy. It sounded crazy to her, but like I've never ever thought about joining a podcast network. And I think part of that is just because the only awareness that I had was of the big people like Joe Rogan that gets $100 million deal and like those types of like top podcasts. And obviously like I'm nowhere near the downloads and everything that he gets, so it just never even really crossed my mind until she said something. And so it's really interesting because I perked up when she said that, just like I perked up on the episode last week where I was talking about manifesting an app deal. And I had perked up when I heard someone else talking about creating an app. And that was like the seed that was planted for me to create the app. This was like the seed that was planted for me getting this deal with a podcast network. It's like the seed was planted, but that was it. And I really just, I was like, oh yeah, like that would actually be really cool. And then I just let it go. Like I wasn't trying to force it. I wasn't thinking, okay, what steps do I have to take to get a podcast deal? How am I going to pitch myself? What do I need to do next? Like none of that. I literally just thought that would be really cool. And then I let it go. And I just kept focusing on my podcast because it's what feels good to me. It's what energizes me. It's what I like doing. And that was, I guess that was like in the summer. And so shortly after, I get a message from the CEO of this company on Instagram. Now, this is interesting because this is the same way my book deal came about. I got a message on Instagram and I thought it was spam. I thought it was fake. And same with this, but like I thought it was, but then at the same time, I was telling myself, this is exactly what happened when I got the book deal. And so I spent like that night, like researching this person and this network and everything. And I was like, oh my God, this is actually, a real thing. And they have a lot of big names. And holy shit, like this is really, really cool. But again, I didn't really expect anything. I just kind of thought I'll talk to him and I'll see where it goes. But I wasn't really expecting anything. And I didn't really know how all this stuff works out. Um, a while back, there was someone who had this media group, and he basically was like trying to get me to pay him a ton of money to like join his group. So I kind of had my guard up a little bit. It wasn't like I really thought too much about it, but I thought I'll hear what he has to say. And that's the same thing I did with the book deal. Like I'll hear what they have to say before I judge it, before I, get excited about it or anything. And so, yeah, like it ended up being an amazing conversation, great great feeling from it. Like my intuition was like, this is yes, like this is a hell yes. Super, super nice person, great group, great podcasts on there. And it just all worked out like perfectly and better than anything that I had even expected or anticipated. And so it's really interesting because it's like at the beginning of the year, I had this goal to grow the podcast, right? I didn't really have any expectations outside of that. I just knew if I grow the podcast, I grow my visibility, therefore I grow my business. So I could see that, but I wasn't thinking like, how am I going to grow? How am I going to, it's just like I'm going to pour my focus and my energy into it. Therefore, it's going to grow. It's going to take off. And clearly, like it got the attention of the CEO of this company. Um, and so when I was on the meeting with him, he was talking about all of these different things that they do to grow the podcast that I had never even thought about, like literally never crossed my awareness. And so this is another thing that I want to bring up because I had the goal to grow, but I was very open to how it can happen. So if I were to say, like, I'm going to grow the podcast and I have to do it by running ads or by getting myself on a gazillion other podcasts and burning out, or, like if I tried to equate it to something really hard that I'd have to do and sacrifice, um, I think I would have really limited myself to that way. But instead, I left it very open. Like, I want to grow the podcast universe. Like, you decide how it's going to happen. And it turns out, just like I always say on the podcast, there's an infinite number of ways in which that can happen. And when you open yourself up to this idea, opportunities literally fall in your lap. And literally, like I'm sitting down, I get this email, I get on a call with him, and it's like there's all these opportunities that I've never even considered for growing the podcast and turning it into like its own business instead of just a marketing tool, which is kind of how I treat it now with my business. And so it just opened me up to this whole like realization that, you're always supported and the universe is always listening to you. It's always listening to you, it's always supporting you, and you don't have to have the how figured out. You don't have to know the steps you want to take. You don't have to even be thinking about the action steps you want to take. You literally just have to have your focus and your energy on what you want. And I mean, I had my focus and my energy on growing the podcast for like, what was it? I guess like 7, 8 months before I even heard of this person. I could have given up between them, and now I could have decided it's not worth it. Nothing's happening. Nothing ever works out. There could have been a million different things that I did to give up, but I held the faith and I held that goal, even when it was really hard and it looked like, oh my gosh, like maybe I'm doing this wrong. Maybe I should be doing coaching and masterminds and these things that I don't really want to do right now. I still said, no, I'm going to stick with this because it feels right. The podcast energizes me. The podcast is what I'm feeling pulled to. So I'm going to keep focusing. And I didn't even like set the goal that I'm going to join a podcast network. I literally just had this broad like goal of like, I love this and I'm going to keep doing it and I'm going to grow it. And I just knew like I had my intuition was telling me something good will come from this. Like, this is what you're supposed to do. You're on the right path. And I kept getting signs too. When I would doubt myself, I would ask for a sign. Then I'd be like, well, what the hell? I'm getting all these signs, but nothing's happening. Like, what the hell? But I still held the faith. And then something eventually did happen. So it's just another lesson of like, things are never going to work out. I don't want to say never, but they usually are not going to work out on like your specific time frame, which is why I don't put a time frame on the goals and the things I'm trying to manifest, because the universe has divine timing. Like, certain things have to fall into place in order to happen, right? And that's not going to work on your time frame. That's going to like let the universe figure that out. That's part of the how. And so it's like every time I've manifested something really incredible, it happens after I just went through a period of thinking nothing's going to happen. maybe I should give up. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this, maybe that. But I hold on anyways. And I say, no, like my internal GPS, my intuition, my gut, everything is telling me to keep moving forward on this path. And so I keep holding the faith. And then something happens. It's always after a period of like doubt and worry and fear and thinking like, oh my gosh, I'm just going to quit everything. So that's the first thing, right? And then the next thing is like the power of expanders, the power of putting yourself around people that are supportive of you, that are going to lift you up. And so in this case, that was my friend Megan. Like she kind of re-energized me with the podcast because that's just the type of person she is. She's growing her podcast. It was a common thing we could connect on and sort of motivate each other. And we both got to that point where we were like really in a state of doubt and worry, and we were able to like re-energize ourselves. So that is such an important lesson of like, don't try to go at it alone. If you have a friend or someone in your network that's supportive, lean on them or get a coach or a mentor or join like a mastermind or a group coaching program. Obviously, you don't want to lean on people that don't get it. That like if I tried to lean on someone that's not in the podcast world, it probably would have been a nightmare because they'd be like, "Oh my gosh, like you're never gonna be," like it's just you have to find people that are actually in it and understand it and can support you and energize you. And it is so important. And every time in my life that I have done that, I've reached new levels because someone else is like giving your subconscious that proof and that evidence of what's possible. And had she not said anything, would the idea of a network ever have crossed my mind? I don't know. I mean, it hadn't up until that point. So maybe not. And like that, I think, was the seed that just opened up that particular possibility for that path. So having this, goal, dropping the how and trusting the universe to figure out how, when, where. I'm just going to hold the idea of what I want and then having someone to support you along the way. And then the other piece of this that I think is important that I think we're missing. And it's interesting because I get lessons on this all the time. Like multiple times a year, I'll get in a rut and I have to learn it the hard way because I guess I'm freaking stubborn. But I'll get the lesson that when you try to control things and make it this like rigid process, like I have a goal and I'm going to write it down every day and I'm going to do a million different things to try to make it happen. And I'm going to try to force it when it doesn't feel good. It never works. What happens is when you are in a vibration of like fun. I call it like fun or this play energy, just like when you were a kid and you were using your imagination just for fun, just for the hell of it. That is when like all of this stuff manifests, is when I'm in that sort of like creative, fun, imaginative state. It's not like I'm saying, I have to do this, I have to get a podcast deal. It's like, oh, that would be fun. Like, oh my gosh, that would be great. Very loose, very letting it go, surrendering, just being like, yeah, that would be fun, cool, like whatever. Not being so, not like gripping it with a stronghold. And I feel like that is a message that happens to me repeatedly because obviously I'm not learning the damn lesson, although I feel like I learned it now. And what made me sort of realize this was, I was talking to my mom about this deal, and she was like, notice how things, you never have to go and like chase something. Things just come to you. Like someone approached you about a book deal. Someone approached you about buying your app. Someone approached you about getting on a podcast network. You didn't have to go pitch yourself. You didn't have to go do all of these things that you think you would have to do to get that. And that's when it clicked. It's like, yeah, because I'm in that energy of just like fun and ease. I don't want to do it. If I have to go and force it and jump through all these hoops, I don't want to do it. I want it to come to me in a way that feels good, that feels fun. And so it does. And all of these things that people say are impossible, like no one's ever going to just reach out to you for a book deal or a podcast deal. Well, clearly that's bullshit. Clearly that is a belief that is not real. And I have now proved it to myself multiple times. So hopefully my subconscious is like registering it at this point that I don't have to do things the hard way. Things can manifest easily and in a way that's fun. And the more you're in that fun, playful energy, the more you're turning on that right side of the brain where your intuition is, where manifestation and creation happens. And we tend to be very left hemisphere dominated because that's the way we're conditioned in schooling and in our society, that we have to have a strategic plan and follow these steps, and it has to be hard. And when we can sort of shift and bring in that creative energy, that energy of fun, imaginative play, that's when things manifest with ease. So it's actually like doing less. Like that's the key here. Like that's the aspect. It's not doing more. It's not taking more steps. It's not having more routines and processes and techniques and methods. It's letting go more, doing less, letting go and trusting. That's where the power and the magic is. That's where you shift into this manifestation mode. And like I said, it's something I have to be reminded of, but like I'm getting it now because I'm seeing impossible things happen when I do that. So, whatever your big goal is, like how can you let go of it a little more? How can you loosen the control and stop thinking about when it's going to happen or the steps you have to take, and just look at it like that would be fun. That would be cool. That would be fun. Like having this loose sort of like, okay, I'm planting the seed, and now that the seed is planted, the universe can do its thing. I don't need to remind it 80 million times. I can just let it go and know that the universe has got it, and the universe will find the best possible path. And the more I surround myself with people that are in that mode or a step ahead of me, the more seeds will be planted. Just like the whole idea of a podcast network didn't even cross my mind on my own, but coupled with a friend that is supportive and into podcasting and knows this world, I was able to get this idea that, and then it's like, again, I didn't obsess over it. I didn't think about pitching myself. I just let it go and let the universe like figure it out. And that's the hardest part, right? Is letting go. But if you think about it as an experiment, as a science experiment, and just saying, I'm going to test this theory out that Stephanie's talking about, that's when I think it'll really help, because that's literally what I did this year. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to test it out. I'm going to put my energy and I'm going to put my focus on podcasting, and I'm going to give it the year. So I guess I did set a time frame, but it was more like I'm going to give it a year, and then I will decide if I want to do more masterminds, live calls, whatever. And so I did that, and I just kind of let it go and let the universe figure it out, and it worked out beautifully. Okay. So anyhow, with all this being said, it's just had me, this is something that's been on my mind for a long time, is that I feel like the manifestation world has sort of shifted into this left hemisphere of the brain, strategic, analytical, rigid process. And I get sucked into it, and I'm sure you get sucked into it. It's easy to do when you have everyone in the world telling you, like, you should do this technique or this method, or you're not doing this right or that right. And I think we're missing the point. I think we're missing the whole idea, which is getting in that energy of creation, of imagination, of getting in the right hemisphere of the brain, of surrendering, having faith, believing, these sort of like non-tangible concepts. That's where we're getting stuck. And so I'm putting some things together to help with this. I want to do something for the beginning of the year that I'll probably do in December, where we sit down and we do this. We pick like that thing, that goal we're going to focus on for the year. And then how do we let go? How do we surrender? How do we get into that energy of play? And how do we create a supportive environment around that? an expansive environment that's going to plant that seed to let that thing grow into whatever it is you want to manifest. So I have sort of the idea of what I want to do. By the time this publishes, I will try to have like a wait list or something um, that you guys can sign up for so that when this thing becomes available, you have it. But I just want it to be something fun that we can do together and we can kind of share that collective energy and be that support system for one another to get us like excited and in that fun, playful energy as we're making our goal for the next year. It doesn't even have to be the next year, like the next step, we'll say, the next chapter. So stay tuned for that. I will let you know as soon as I have a wait list or something so that you can get on that and get notified when this idea takes form. But I'm really excited about it. There's going to be a lot of epic things coming. I'm kind of revamping everything in my business for 2025, simplifying things. And I want to share this stuff that I've learned over the past year with you. So there's a lot of fun things coming. So stay tuned for that. And I'll see you back here next week.